Helen Keller was a great American author, political activist, and lecturer. She was the first deaf and blind person to earn a Bachelor of Arts degree. The story of how Helen Keller's teacher, Anne Sullivan, broke through the isolation and posed a near complete lack of language, allowing the girl to blossom as she learned to communicate, has become widely known through the dramatic depictions of the play and film of the miracle worker. At the age of 2, she suffered an illness that left her blind and deaf. Her parents took her to Dr. Alexander Graham Bell, who recommended the Perkins Institute for the Blind in Boston. It was there at age 7 that Helen Keller was taught by Anne Sullivan through the sense of touch. Anne eventually taught Helen to read Braille. Helen Keller began attending college and learned her lessons through an interpreter. She was a great author, well-traveled, and was outspoken in her anti-war convictions. Helen Keller was born on June 27, 1880, in Alabama. Her family lived on a homestead in Ivy Green. Helen's grandfather had built this homestead decades earlier. Helen's father spent many years as an editor for the North Alabamian and had served as captain for the Confederate Army. Helen's paternal grandmother was a second cousin of Robert E. Lee. Her father's lineage can be traced to native Switzerland. Coincidentally, one of Helen's Swiss ancestors was the first teacher of the deaf in Zurich. Helen Keller reflected on this coincidence in her first autobiography, stating that there is no king who has not had a slave among his ancestors, and no slave who has not had a king among his. Contrary to public opinion, Helen Keller was not born deaf and blind. It was not until she was 19 months old that she contracted an illness described by doctors as an acute congestion of the stomach and the brain, which might have been scarlet fever or meningitis. The illness did not last for a particularly long time, but it left her deaf and blind. At the time, she was able to communicate somewhat with Martha Washington, the 6-year-old daughter of the family cook, who understood her signs. By the age of 7, she had over 60 home signs to communicate with her family. Miss Keller became very active in helping the blind, especially those who were blinded in World War I or by those blinded in poor working conditions. She received honors and awards from all over the world for her efforts to help the blind. Helen Keller learned to type on a Braille typewriter and wrote many books. Helen Keller's faith was one of astounding virtue. She wrote, "I thank God for my handicaps, for through them I have found myself, my work, and my God." In an interview, Helen Keller was asked, "Can you see the world?" Her response was, "I can see, and that is why I can be so happy. In what you call the dark, but which to me is golden. I can see the God-made world, not the man-made world." Helen Keller also said, "Self-pity is our worst enemy, and if we yield to it, we can never do anything wise in the world." Helen Keller also gave us much wisdom with a statement she made on June 26, 1955, regarding the reading of the Bible. Helen Keller stated, "It gives me deep, comforting sense that the things seen are temporal and things unseen are eternal. Just as all the things upon earth represent and image forth all the realities of another world, so the Bible is one mighty representative of the whole spiritual life of humanity." Helen Keller concluded with 4 things that we need to know in life. Think clearly without hurry or confusion. Love everyone sincerely. Act in everything with the highest motives. Trust God unhesitantly. Later on in life, Keller suffered a series of strokes in 1961 and spent the last years of her life in her home. The state of Alabama placed a statue of Helen Keller at their U.S. Capitol. And then in 1961, Helen Keller met President John F. Kennedy. She received the French Legion of Honor and the U.S. Presidential Medal of Freedom. We can all be inspired by such a woman who overcame so much to accomplish so much.